pride. Pride leads to envy. Envy leads to hate. Hate leads to lies and manipulation, then eventually murder. And murder? That leads to the dark side. No, I'm not butchering a Star Wars quote here. That's exactly what happens in today's story. And what kicked all that off? A simple act of kindness. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. The South has always been known for its Southern belles, the fair young ladies that every Southern gentleman searched out in the hopes to marry. The more we dig, it seems to have always been the case. Way back in what is present-day Coffee County, Tennessee, near modern-day Manchester, there's a legend that surrounds the once prominent and well-off Shelton family. It's said that the family had the fairest and most eligible young ladies in the area. Their parents knew this, of course, and found ways to use this to social advantages to increase their prestige. Some things never change, huh? Anyway, that's not what this story is about. Let's get back to the daughters, the most beautiful being the youngest, Olivia Shelton. One day, as the story goes, Olivia encountered a beggar, a girl around her own age, in the market. The young beggar was in rough shape, dressed in rags, dirty clothes with matted and tangled hair, and the smell of the girl caused others to keep their distance. Olivia did not recognize the young girl, and on asking, neither did anyone else. Olivia's kind-hearted nature got the better of her, and she knelt in front of the beggar and asked what her name was. The girl never spoke. She only held out a dirty hand as if asking for money or food. Olivia again asked what her name was, but the girl never responded. She avoided eye contact altogether, just keeping her hand extended. The heartbreak of seeing someone so close to her own age in this state, coupled with the now curiosity of the girl's identity, was more than Olivia could bear. "That settles it," she said, then pulled the young girl to her feet by her hand. "You're coming home with me." When Olivia got home with the new stranger, her sisters were giddy with the thought of a new makeover project. Their mother was not, though, but gave in after an onslaught of begging from her daughters to let the new girl stay with them. They immediately set to work, and when the job was done, they were astounded at the fair-skinned, blonde beauty they had uncovered. In fact, the Shelton daughters are said to have been a bit jealous of the silent, strange girl's looks, but none as much as their own mother. Mrs. Shelton saw the new girl's beauty as a threat to the standing of her own daughters, and this simply would not do. Mrs. Shelton's worries seemed valid enough when her sons returned home from work that evening. At dinner, they were so enthralled with the stranger's beauty that they had hardly spoke or ate anything at all. And even though the young girl had probably not eaten in God knows how long, she conducted herself with grace and elegance, still never speaking. In the days that followed, fights are said to have erupted between the brothers over the strange new girl's attention, though she ignored any and all advances from them. The quiet young girl never spoke and only kept to herself. This did not deter the boys from bragging around town about the new resident, though. As word spread, the normal gentleman callers that would often visit the Shelton daughters increased, but only to try catch a glimpse of the new stranger hiding away within the house. Olivia was not jealous of their new resident like her sisters were, though. In fact, she made every effort to make friends, despite never getting any kind of response from the girl. Despite this, Mrs. Shelton took notice of the unnatural devotion their new guest was receiving from the young males in the area. The silent beauty had become the talk of the town, leaving Miss Shelton in a bit of a pickle. If she allowed the girl to stay, attention would continue to be pulled away from her own daughters, thus endangering any prospective proposals for them. But if she kicked the girl out, she would lose her social standings and be a less than gracious hostess. Plus, no doubt some other family would scoop up the girl for their own benefits, creating even more rivalry. Her only option was to keep the girl in the house as a guest. But there were gray areas after all. Not everything is black and white. Miss Shelton would lock her away from the town as long as it took for marriage proposals for Olivia and her other daughters to be negotiated. She banned her sons from mentioning the girl out in public anymore, then called the girl into her parlor. Mrs. Shelton sat her down and explained that it was not safe in town and that great harm could come to her if she ever left the house. The girl did not argue. She only stared at the floor and remained silent. The plan seemed to work, but only for a short time. One spring afternoon, a young man that Olivia had been admiring for quite some time came calling at the Shelton home. Rather than ask for Olivia, though, the young gentleman called on the blonde house guest for a stroll into town. This visit sent Miss Shelton into a rage, fueled more by Olivia's crying and heartbreak. Olivia locked herself in her room and cried throughout the night. Her mother tried to console her, but Olivia only begged for the new girl to be thrown out of the house. That's when Miss Shelton devised a new plan. She called on the local minister and insisted that the only explanation for all this strange behavior was that the strange new girl must be a witch. How else could a common beggar that barely left the house grab the attention of every man in town? Surely it couldn't be due to the constant bragging and probably over-embellishing stories from the Shelton sons, coupled with the raging hormones of teenage and young men, right? Well, surprise, surprise, the local minister didn't come to this conclusion. He had seen his congregation's strange infatuation with the newcomer firsthand and needed little convincing to Miss Shelton's claims. He sent word to the town council for a trial, and Miss Shelton demanded that the council pass judgment without the girl's presence. After all, she couldn't speak on her own anyway. Besides, the council were all men, and they too could be bewitched by the girl's devilry. The minister agreed, and the council was convened without allowing the girl any representation at all. The trial began, and only heard the accusations from Miss Shelton, followed by a good fire and brimstone speech from the minister. That's all that was needed. A verdict was passed within minutes of the trial starting. They declared her a witch, without any evidence, and immediately started debates on how to rid the town of her spell. The normal means of hanging, drowning, or burning at the stake seemed barbaric and utterly northern, so the council opted for a more humane approach of burying the girl alive. And just in case, large stones would be used along with the dirt to prevent any escape. A mob was sent to the Shelton house to get the girl, and another group was sent to the cemetery to find rocks and dig the grave. The silent, blonde-haired beauty was dragged from bed by her hair from the house. There, she was stripped, tied to a pole, and dragged through the streets of the town to the cemetery. The townspeople spit and cursed at her as she was shoved toward the freshly dug grave. Even through all this, it's said that she never resisted and never uttered a sound. This only enraged the people more, and a brutal attack ensued. Olivia was on hand and suddenly had a change of heart. She ran into the fray, trying to shield the girl from the onslaughts of kicks and beatings with shovel handles, but to no avail. Olivia was grabbed and pulled out of the way. They then stood the girl back up at the edge of the grave. She finally looked up and locked eyes with Olivia before shouting the only words anyone ever heard her speak. "I am Sadie Baker." Sadie Baker was pushed into the grave, and then the surrounding people took turns throwing down the collected rocks, burying the helpless girl under a small mound of stones. Months passed, and life around the town eventually returned to normal. Mrs. Shelton wasted no time arranging marriages for all her children, sons included, just in case. Olivia was the last to marry, and ended up with her original crush as she had always wanted. At first, all was well. The couple was happy as they could be, and soon talks of having children of their own started. All seemed as it should be for a while, until one night, while getting ready for bed, Olivia's husband found her staring at her own reflection in the mirror. Her dark hair was clutched in her hands. He asked if Olivia was okay, but Olivia turned and screamed at him, accusing him of wanting to be with Sadie instead of her. She then cried herself to sleep, and every night after that. Olivia's paranoia continued to grow over the next several days. She cursed her long dark hair and olive complexion, now hating how she looked. She told her husband she wished she looked like Sadie so he would love her again. He did all he could to assure her he loved her, but Olivia's delusions would not let her hear it. Olivia stopped eating and sleeping. She would only sit and stare at her reflection, pulling at her own hair. Olivia's husband begged the town's doctor for help, but no treatment or medicine seemed to work. Then, out of desperation, he turned to the local minister. He said Sadie's final words must have bewitched Olivia, and it must be Sadie's spirit trying to take over Olivia's body. The rational minister jumped into action, performing exorcism after exorcism, but nothing worked. Olivia's condition continued to get worse. One night, her husband found Olivia again staring into the mirror, but this time her eyes were wild. Her long dark hair laid in clumps on the floor. Her head was a mash of jagged tufts and bleeding cuts from the pair of garden shears she held in her hands. She then smiled at her husband and said the ugly dark hair didn't belong with her new blonde hair. "Do you like it?" she finally asked. Her husband tried to console and calm Olivia, who then flew into a rage and attacked him. Olivia threw him to the floor and pounced on top of him. She screamed into his face, "I am Sadie Baker," then ran from the house, never to be seen again. Around the cemetery where Sadie is buried, people started reporting a woman's laughter and screams coming from the surrounding forest. Some believed it to be Olivia suffering from guilt. Others believed it was the spirit of Sadie Baker, wandering the area, trying to find her body. The legend quickly became that until Sadie found her body, she would curse all those who came to the site without leaving a coin, just as Olivia should have done when they first met on the streets. The spot where Sadie is said to be buried is marked by a single headstone, engraved with only a name. Stories still persist about strange sounds and a wandering female spirit in the cemetery grounds, though they're split on whether the spirit belongs to Sadie or Olivia. Even today, the headstone can be found with various coins and trinkets, some left as gifts, and some left to ward off evil. More than likely, this is a story of misunderstanding, religious fanatics of the day, and pure spite and jealousy. Still, though, if visiting the site, you may want to think twice about coming empty-handed, just in case.